Hi, my name is Tianyu Shea. I'm a third-year medical student at the New York Institute of Technology, and you're listening to Do or Do Not. Welcome to our 10th episode. We have a very special interview today. Lenox Hill is a new Netflix exclusive docuseries following 4 physicians at Lenox Hill hospitals, showing the incredible work that they do on a day-to-day basis. The series holds an 100% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes and has received universal acclaim on Metacritic. For our interview today, we have one of these physicians. Dr. Mirtha Macri is an emergency medicine physician who graduated from NYITCOM in 2008 and subsequently completed her residency at St. Luke's Hospital, now known as Mount Sinai West. Dr. Macri will discuss important attributes needed for an emergency medicine physician, insight and tips into the residency process, her perspective on an osteopathic education, and her dedication to helping the underserved. We hope you find her journey through film and as an emergency medicine physician as enjoyable and illuminating as we did.
Okay, Mirtha, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hello.
Now, you just had a baby, is that right?
I did 10 days ago.
That is crazy. You are the second woman that's sharing their time with us postpartum, and I think that's awesome. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So I just want to start, first of all, you're like a movie star, right? So that's so cool. Are you totally amazed that the show is doing so well? It got like 100 on Rotten Tomatoes. Were you expecting it, or?
I knew that it's for Netflix, but I didn't initially embrace the idea that this was going to be so big amongst the medical community, but it did. And I'm happy that it turned out so positive because we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. We're not actors. I actually have a lot of respect for actors after doing this docuseries because, it wasn't scripted. It was all improvised. It all happened at the moment, but it was really interesting to see what it's like being behind a camera and having a camera following you around. It took some time to adjust to all that. So I have a newfound respect for actors. So yeah, it's been a great experience actually up to now.
It's so cool. Again, I feel like I'm interviewing a movie star, so I'm a little starstruck. I'm excited.
Definitely not a movie star, but it's a one in a lifetime experience. I've never done anything like it before, so I'm happy with the positive feedback so far.
So let me ask you, how did this come about? Like, did they look for you? Did you look for them? Was there an audition? Were there other people vying for the spot?
So the filmmakers, they had already done they mirrored a series just like this one. They did a series in Israel and Tel Aviv just like this one. And they came to Lenox Hill specifically because one of the doctors from that series came to Lenox Hill from Tel Aviv to work. And then he subsequently got a job at another institution, but they met the surgeons at Lenox Hill. And then from there, branched out and started asking other specialties, would they be interested in appearing in their docuseries. Where I'm filming is at Lenox Health Greenwich Village, which is the new standalone ER for Manhattan. And it's a satellite ER for Lenox Hill. So I'm not physically at Lenox Hill. I'm at the satellite ER for them in Greenwich Village. And when they came to visit the facility, they were taken aback. We're the first standalone ER in Manhattan. So it was interesting and they wanted to film right there. So they interviewed a few of us, of the attendings and the nurse practitioner and PAs. And they approached me. It was just a basic, conversation, very down to earth. Our views about medical care and healthcare and what type of doctors we are. And it was a very laid back conversation. And then the filmmakers subsequently approached me later and said they'd love to film me for the docuseries.
So cool. My wife always says I'm a little selfish and I always look at things from my perspective. So my first question on your perspective is, you were pregnant when you got cast for this, I assume. Did that factor into your thought, whether you're going to do it or not? My second is, what did your husband say when you came home and said, listen, I'm pregnant and I want to go on this series? Was he like, oh my God, I don't think so? Or was he supportive?
He was super supportive. I was early in my pregnancy, actually. When they interviewed me, I was so early that I hadn't even told anybody. So they didn't actually know that I was pregnant when I interviewed with them. They approached me a few weeks later, and that's when I told them, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant now. And they were like, awesome.
That's so
So when
funny.
they first interviewed me, they had no idea. And then when they approached me about wanting to do the series, of course, I said, I'm very interested. I think I would do it, but let me talk to my husband since,
Right.
I'm pregnant now. And it's going to be a very intimate filming of our personal,
Of course.
the
Wow.
whole purpose of the series is to film our personal lives as well as us as doctors. So, but he was incredibly supportive, never the entire ride, the entire thing.
That's awesome. So the documentary, for those that haven't watched it, is great. And it follows neurosurgeon, an OBGYN, and you. And I have to be honest, I think that you are the best one on the series. And everybody else is great, but you're just so empathic in the way you speak to patients. I just think it's great. I think you're a great doctor. I think it's great to watch you. And I think it should be inspiring for everyone thinking about going into medicine or people in medicine, residents. I just think you're great.
Thank you.
I mean, was it hard though? Like, I think we spoke about this briefly. There's one scene that I remember. I won't get too graphic, but I'm a gastroenterologist. So of course I always think back on the GI stuff, but you were like lancing an abscess on a young man's buttocks and they were taping the whole thing. And you were empathic during the whole, you were funny and being nice and being lighthearted and making the patient feel comfortable. And of course, this is all getting videotaped. Was that difficult to do?
It wasn't difficult for me. It didn't take me a lot of time to ease into the filmmaker style. So the two filmmakers are incredibly, they make it so that they're almost not in the room. I mean, it took some time to me mentally adjust to that, but Ruthie and Adi are a husband and wife couple, and they just make it so that you don't even realize that the camera's in the room. They actually ask you to please just disregard that they're even following you around. Initially, that took some time to adjust to. And once I was very comfortable around them, I was also comfortable seeing patients with the camera in the room. But that scene actually definitely, I follow that practice with all my patients, especially in patients who are hesitant to be in the ER, maybe they don't understand the plan of care. I find that when I make them feel comfortable, it makes the procedure more comfortable with them. It makes the visit better for them. And they're likely to come back to you, which in emergency medicine is one of those big challenges that you lose a lot of patients, to follow up. And a patient like this in particular very much needed follow-up. So there are ways that I use to make patients feel comfortable that will allow them to come back to me and so amazing. I can keep taking care of them.
Amazing. Again, I've worked with a lot of doctors during the years, and I think everybody on this show is really great, but I think for me at least, you really stand out. And I guess, obviously called you to do this with us because you're amazing. And when I was watching the show, and I don't watch any I don't watch any television. I don't watch any medical shows if I'm going to watch television. But a friend of mine actually told me the show was great, and I turned it on. And I looked at your name badge, and I saw that you were DO. And obviously we're doing this podcast, and I thought, I would love to have this woman on our podcast because I think she would be so inspirational. Did anyone ask you, and all of your jackets, I noticed, obviously say DO, all of your scrubs say DO. Did anybody ask you about you being a DO? Was there ever a dialogue or a question about that with Netflix or with the authors?
No, never came up. They just confirmed at the end, for editing purposes, for the subtitling and all those things, the correct spelling of my name and my title. But there was never a question about that. I actually, even with the filmmakers, my background, educational and training did not come up at all. They were not focusing on that. They were focusing on us as people, as doctors, just as people, irrespective of what institutions we came from. It was not even a question.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think so.
So we're gonna take a little step back, and I'm just gonna ask you some general questions. Were your parents born in the U.S. or were they born outside the U.S.?
Both my parents immigrated here. They were born in South America. My father's from Uruguay. My mother's from Peru. They immigrated here in their early 20s. So in the 70s, gained citizenship pretty quickly. So I'm a first generation. There's not a lot of medical people in my family. I definitely, within my generation, I am the only physician. I have a sister who's a PA, but that's about it.
And did your parents obviously spoke Spanish at home? Is that right?
Yeah, they speak only Spanish at home still. My mother still only speaks Spanish everywhere she goes. But, America is so diverse that especially where we grew up, there's a huge Latino community. So, she just became accustomed to not having to speak English so much.
I think I told you this when we were talking earlier. I did my GI training in Miami, and part of the thing that drew me to Miami was the Latin culture and the fact that, I could learn some Spanish and have sort of an immersion experience at the same time that I was learning gastroenterology. And I think that everybody needs to understand the importance of that, especially translating into patient care, which I assume helps you in a day-to-day in your work as well.
Oh, especially where we're located. I mean, Manhattan, it behooves you to at least know medical Spanish. And depending on which parts of New York City you're in, especially if you're in one of the boroughs, just unbelievable what an asset that is to, especially in emergency medicine.
Right,
in
no
a
doubt.
field that, is time, there's time limits, there's time constraints. And if you have medical Spanish under your belt, at least the last thing you want to do is not have to go out and get a translator. So it's been an incredible asset for me to be bilingual, at least in my career in medicine.
Yeah, there's no question. No question. Again, I'm not in a very heavily Latin community, but when patients come in that are Spanish speaking, even if it's not their primary language, it's just so helpful to bond with the patient when you can speak their language.
Definitely.
Right.
I agree.
So we're going to go back a little bit now. Can you tell me when you decided, did you always want to be a doctor, or when you decided you want to be a doctor?
So my desire to be a doctor, I do have some, a couple of doctor uncles in my family who exposed me somewhat early when I was a teenager to medicine. And I really didn't gain a strong interest into it until I got to college. And when I arrived at college, I majored in the biological sciences.
Did you go to college, Mirtha?
A small university called Kane in New Jersey.
Okay.
It was close to home. It was commuter. It was in-state tuition.
Perfect.
I lived at home, which is very typical where I grew up and how I grew up. It was like, you're not going to college. You're not going away to live at college. You're just going to live at home, which was fine. I mean, I think it helped me out immensely. And when I started my freshman year, I started working at a doctor's office that was an entire dialysis. The head doctor specialized in nephrology. So he had dialysis units.
I'm sorry, Mirtha, that's kidney disease for people that don't. He was a kidney doctor, right?
Yes.
Right. We got some students, so we're going to kind of make sure they understand. Yeah. So you work with a kidney doctor. I'm sorry.
Worked with a kidney doctor and dialysis units that were based in Elizabeth, New Jersey and Irvington. And, if I can explain that population to you, I was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey. It's a very underserved population. So when I went to go visit these units and volunteered at the hospital and rounded with him, I was taken aback by that was like my first exposure to medicine and medicine within an underserved community. And I immediately had a passion for it. I was like, this is where I want to work. Not specifically in those units, but within communities that are like this. And I would see the patients later in the office, the same patients that were getting dialysis. And I started seeing, what real struggles are in healthcare and medicine and how I could be an advocate for patients and at the same time advocate for my community. And I started taking in a lot of hours at the office, and I moved up to doing billing and coding for them. So I just immediately developed a quick interest in it. And then subsequently went on to medical school and stayed in New York at NYITCOM.
So when did you first hear about osteopathic school? Or how did you decide on NYITCOM? How did that happen?
So when I was working at this doctor's office, we were at his office was specifically at a big medical center here in Elizabeth, New Jersey. So I got to meet other physicians, many physicians. Some were MDs, some were DOs. So I kind of got an idea of what the difference was as I was in the hospitals. I mean, and I really, to tell you the truth, realized there was no difference. So when I came time to apply, I applied everywhere, both MD and DO.
Okay. Then you wanted to stay close to home, I would guess. Were you looking to stay?
Definitely staying close to home. And actually, our family physician's a DO. So there's many DOs here in the area where I grew up.
Funny.
And he's been my parents' physician for years. So I decided I wanted to stay in the area for financial reasons, not having to move away and get my own place. It was a very big advantage to live with my family, which culturally that's completely okay.
Tell me about NYITCOM. Like, did you have a good experience? What did you think of the school? And what type of people did you meet while you were there?
So I thought that NYITCOM was amazing. I met so many people. I had 2 roommates whom I still keep in touch with in my first 2 years. I thought the community there was very nurturing. I thought that they were set up technologically. I was in medical school from 2004 to 2008. And already in 2004, I thought the online classes, everything was really set up technological wise. It was pretty modern for its time. But I still did in-person attendance to class because
Right.
that's just the way I am. I enjoyed learning the information in person and then, re-listening to classes when I needed to. I had a nice group of friends there, some of them whom I later traveled internationally with to do an infectious disease course in Peru.
Cool.
Others, yes. And the others I started an underserved school volunteer program with in the Bronx, where we got backpacks for grade school students that didn't have resources to start school. So we did get a backpack for every kid in grade 2 in this Bronx school. Others, I went on to volunteer also for the holidays when there was Thanksgiving and soup kitchens. So I actually had a very nice network of friends that were on the same page with me as far as wanting to work in underserved communities. There was a Latino group that we were part of, and that's how we got together to do all these community projects, which I thought was great.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So let me ask you, from my experience, I personally never wanted to be a doctor, and I ended up just thinking it was great and wanting to help people. And I think you're a similar mindset to me. That was my motivation. We've interviewed a lot of people, and I don't think better or worse of people, but, there's a lot of sentiment, maybe they thought they wanted to be a dermatologist or, wanted to do something like plastic surgery and then ended up doing something that was very helpful to others. I'm just curious, did you ever think about those things, or were you always looking to do something that you'd be able to give back to underserved communities with?
No, I never really thought about those specialties myself. I pretty much early on, I want to say by the second year of NYITCOM, I already knew I wanted to do emergency medicine because we had toured a hospital in the Bronx, and I immediately was like, this is the specialty for me. Right. And there were many pluses for me. I mean, it was lifestyle. It was, I never put finances very high up on the list, but lifestyle, work happiness, scheduling. I mean, emergency medicine just kind of met all those points for me. So I knew that and there was opportunity to travel, which is something that I love to do. There's an opportunity for international medicine as well within emergency medicine. So I really embraced all those things. And I said, this is a specialty for me. I didn't really do any, searching in other specialties.
You knew you wanted to be an ER doctor.
For sure.
You fell in love and that was it.
That was it.
So you're finishing NYITCOM, you're having a great experience, you're learning a lot, and you go to apply for ER residency. Did you look at osteopathic residencies? Did you only look at allopathic residencies? How did you pick a residency, and how did you feel in the interview process?
So I was very particular. Also in residency, I wanted to stay in the area. I knew that I wanted to stay in New York City after having done my entire third year in the Bronx. I only did pursue allopathic residencies in Manhattan. I was pretty selective. I did rotations at certain places, and I said, these are the places where I did rotations that I'm going to apply to. I did rank some very low, but I did put them on my rank list. But I had such positive experiences at the places where I rotated that I didn't feel certain, but I got such good feedback from everybody that I rotated with that got into my number one. And it was just my experience that was so positive when I was there. I felt that I was going to be okay.
Right. No, that's great. That's perfect. Sometimes I think you just get a feeling that this is where I fit and this is where I'm going to learn and this is where I'm going to be, right?
Yeah.
And so you matched, I guess, for that. That was your top choice. And what was the name of the program?
St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, now Mount Sinai.
Okay. And how was your experience once you got there in general and as an osteopath?
So I was the only osteopathic resident in my class. Prior to that, I think there were only 2 other osteopathic residents that were accepted ever to that residency program.
That's amazing.
Yes, it's a very competitive program. So I had such a positive experience rotating there as a student. I also did some medicine rotations there. I really wanted it. So I worked so hard to get it. And when I arrived there, it was amazing. It was even more, I was in New York City where I wanted to be, in Manhattan at a place that I wanted to be in. And my experience there was unbelievable. And the fact that I was a DO had nothing to do with anything. Once we got in, we were all residents. We were all on the same level, irrespective of where we came from.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a universal. I think one of the people we interviewed kind of brought this out the most. I think it's almost in the students' head sometimes that it's an issue. And when you get out into the world, it's not an issue to anyone.
Right. Absolutely not.
So you finished your residency and you decided to go out into practice. Was it difficult to find an ER job and you wanted to stay in the city? Was that kind of your main thing?
It wasn't difficult at all. The other thing I wanted to add is that there's 3 and 4 year ER residencies. So I was very heavily concentrating on the 3-year route versus the 4-year. I had done a lot of research and, it turns out there's really no difference if you spend an extra year doing emergency medicine in residency, but by 3 years, you should be set to go out and be an attending.
Right.
So one of my attendings at that time was working at a community hospital in New Jersey, not very far from where I grew up. It's a large community hospital. They're called Overlook Medical Center in Summit, New Jersey. So he, at the time, was working there. And he said, if you're very interested, I know they're looking for new attendings. So I interviewed. I loved the place. I interviewed at many different hospitals, including the one where I worked at in college. And Overlook seemed to be like the right fit for me at the time because, ironically, it was community medicine within a suburb. It was very different from city medicine, from medicine in the Bronx or Manhattan. And I think one thing that a residency in Manhattan didn't prepare me for was a job in a suburb like Summit, New Jersey, in the community. So I said to myself, I want to take this on and I feel comfortable here. And I took a job. That was my first job out of residency.
Okay. And then eventually you ended up obviously at Lenox Hill where you are.
Right. And I picked up other per diem jobs because I didn't really discover this difference between community medicine, academic medicine until my 3rd year in residency. Actually, I didn't really think about it. They're like, so do you want to stay in academics or do you want to go out in the community? I'm like, that's interesting. What's the community like? So I really loved it. So I left academics. I would still per diem at my residency. I would go on to per diem there and a couple other community hospitals where I felt that I needed to be in touch with the community. I moved to Jersey City in the interim, and Jersey City had a tiny community hospital where I would also per diem at just to continue my emergency medicine knowledge within underserved communities. Overlook doesn't necessarily has a diverse community, but it's not like working in the Bronx or in Jersey City.
Right.
So I try to always keep that diversity within emergency medicine within my practice.
I'm going to change gears a couple of times. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was choosing emergency medicine. So from my perspective, it's interesting. So everybody has, something that fits for them, but sometimes people ask me, what specialties would I not have done? And I always say that the specialties that I think are the most difficult, and I don't know if I can handle, are radiology. I think radiology is super difficult because none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. And unfortunately in radiology, those mistakes are immortalized, right? That you can go back and look at films and those films are always there. And the second thing that I think I wouldn't be able to do is emergency medicine. And the reason is that you have such a short amount of time to make such important decisions. And personally, I don't think I would be able to sleep at night. I think I would just have I saw 50 people today and I would just be thinking I hope I made the right call, and all 50 people would be flying through my head. So obviously this is something that you like and that you thrive on. Can you tell me a little bit about what about emergency medicine really appeals to you?
So I early on noticed that it's a very social type of medicine. You get to meet a lot of different types of patients, a lot of different types of people. You realize that no two people are similar. And it's interesting because emergency medicine is challenging. And by the way, the thought of seeing 50 people also will run through my head at the end of a shift. And I'll think to myself, almost like I just got out of a very second year medical school exam. Like, did I do the right, did I admit this person to the right floor? And I'll follow up on them the next day. But anyways, so that happens to, I feel, all of us, and no matter what specialty we go to. Definitely. But I like that you can speak to so many different people, and it's not textbook medicine. That's what's so challenging about it. And I really love that. You can see a presentation of DKA and diabetic ketoacidosis in one patient, and it could present completely different in another patient. And then you have all the barriers of diversity, culture, languages. The volume in the ER is really high in some places. I mean, all these things maybe sound negative to some people, but I really embrace it. I love it. I get into a certain flow and I can do it. I can multitask. So it requires some multitasking. Yes, it could be rushed sometimes, and that definitely has been a challenge for me. Wanting to take time with a patient is always a good thing. And sometimes in emergency medicine, you don't get that. It's also like an adrenaline challenge. You get you get this person who's so critically ill, and you have to figure it out. And I really love that. It's a good rush.
Right.
Definitely.
I know you haven't listened to the podcast. We had another ER physician on the podcast a while back, and he had gotten a piece of advice. He was told that you needed to be in ER 2 out of 3 things, and those were smart, fast, and nice. So he was told that he had to have 2 of those 3 to be a good ER doctor. I don't know if you agree with that, but if you had to pick 2, which of those 2 would you say that you have? Or do you have all 3? Again, don't be modest.
No, I think I have all 3.
That's amazing. I watch the show. I have to agree. I think you have all 3. That's amazing. I love it.
The nice part is, you think about that, I've had actually friends that say, Mirtha, are you really like that in the ER with people? And I'm like, yes.
Right.
But the thing is that it will make your life and your job so much easier and such a happier place if you're just nice to people, because they're going to want to come back to you. They're going to cooperate. Imagine if you're rushed, or you don't give them enough time, or you just disregard their needs. There could be just many reasons how you can come off as not nice. That patient is just going to turn around and just not cooperate with your plan, or just say, I'm not coming back to the CR, and then they'll be lost to follow-up. And that matters to me. That matters to me, that the type of emergency medicine I practice is important. And it's not just always critical patients. Sometimes you have to play the social worker. So you wear a lot of hats in emergency medicine. And one thing that one of my senior attendings talked to me on one of the first few weeks when I became a resident, is that one thing about emergency medicine is, and I also think this could be for every specialty, but ER in particular, depending on where you practice, you're always going to be a lifelong student, always going to be learning something new. There's always going to be something that comes through the doors that you're never going to see in your life. And that's very exciting. That's super exciting for me.
Yeah, that's cool. That's great. I agree. That's part of the joy of medicine, is just learning every day. I totally agree.
Definitely.
So, Mirtha, can I ask you, so is your husband a physician?
No, he's not, but we met through a medical school friend, because he was going to go to medical school and then trained himself to be a programmer, and recently finished up law school. So
amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So now, was it hard? You're working as a doctor and he's going to law school, and you're like having a couple of kids at the same time. So there's a lot getting thrown at you. Was that really difficult to do? And did he support you and you support him? And how did that work? Was that tough?
It was incredibly hard to do. The only way it worked out is because we were obviously very supportive of each other. We have family around that can help us,
Family's
which is
huge.
huge. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to stay here, because I knew later on that I would need family. You always need family. If you have a good relationship with your family, they are an invaluable asset to your life. And then, we had to hire help.
Yeah, listen.
It works.
You got 4 jobs going. You got 4 jobs for 2 people. That's a lot of work.
Yes. And I also married a person who, like me, is willing to multitask and take on, he sometimes when one of us is going lowered, or we're feeling a little low, or feeling a little stressed out or overwhelmed, this is it. This is the time to work hard. And the end result is really going to be unbelievable. And it has been. Like, when he finished law school, it was unbelievable. And we had children, and we're still moving on with our careers. And, we're at an older age, but it never stops. It's really great.
Right. You guys are doing great. No question in my book.
It doesn't get boring.
No boring. That
No
I definitely
boring.
see. I don't see any way that you could be bored with all that. I watched the episode, the COVID episode. You were pregnant while you were working in the ER. I keep thinking back to my own experience. I volunteered on a COVID floor, doing some hospitalist work during the pandemic. And my wife is incredibly supportive. And, it was definitely easier for me with having her. But for you, you had to make a decision to do that job while you were pregnant. And obviously your husband had to be supportive of that decision. How was that? I mean, I can't imagine how stressful that must have been for you and for your husband.
That was definitely very stressful for us. I had to go with what he felt the most comfortable with, and I had to respect his decision, and his thinking about it was that we should separate. So we did separate for several weeks so that I wouldn't expose our current son and him, and then subsequently the rest of the family, because we're so tied into family, which at first I thought was completely drastic. I thought to myself, I'm not gonna be able to do this. This is insane. But that's a decision we had to take, and I had to respect that decision because he was scared and he was afraid. And very respectable feeling about all this. We're all scared and afraid, no matter who we are, no matter how tough we are. This virus somewhat revealed our feelings, even at work. It showed people's fears, even amongst my coworkers. We're so in emergency medicine, we're ready for everything. Disaster medicine. And when the virus came, and it was like, this was a real thing. So we made the decision to separate. And then I think at first it was very drastic, but in the end, it turned out to be so much better for all of us because it was a decision that we made simultaneously, and we were supportive of we had to be supportive of each other for it to work. I mean, whenever hard things like this in life present themselves, the way to get through them is to be on the same page and be supportive. So it did work out for the best. I just had the baby and everything luckily was okay and we're all safe. We reunited a few weeks later, but it was okay. Everything was, we did everything very conservatively, but it turned out to be okay.
Yeah, I just have to say, just a comment from me. It's great. I worked on a COVID floor. You watch these neurosurgeons on the show working on a COVID floor. I think it's great that people rolled up their sleeves and pitched in. But to me, you pregnant, gowned and gloved, and working on the front line, just can't beat that. I think it's amazing. I have to say thank you, even as a doctor. I think that's amazing.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you, did you take loans? A little personal, but did you take loans for medical school? And do you still have loans that you're paying now? And do you think that affected your choice of specialty, or does it weigh on you on a daily basis? How do you feel about medical school loans?
I did take loans. Also, I took full loans to go to NYITCOM, and I am still paying them back. One thing that I did early on was start paying them back when you're a resident, even if it's a small amount. I strongly advise that. If you can do that, start paying them back in residency. It definitely didn't affect which specialty I was going to pick. I mean, I actually didn't even, it's income based and they're very doable. One other thing I would definitely advise is to refinance your loans and pay them back at a faster rate and faster time. Which is what I did. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm also actually very close to done paying them off.
That's amazing. That's
and
great.
I've been in attending for, it's going to be 11 years in a few months. So since I graduated medical school, so I highly advise that, to be aggressive in paying them back.
My last question for you, Mirtha, again, thank you so much for being with us. Is there one piece of advice, any advice that you were given by your mentors, by an attending, by somebody in school that you would want to pass on to the people that are listening to the podcast?
Yeah, so for prospective medical students and medical students that are listening, one thing that was very much ingrained in me, and actually it was in college when I was working with this husband and wife couple. It was a husband and wife couple who ran this entire medical practice and dialysis units, was that you have to go into a field that is going to constantly stimulate you, constantly learning. It should challenge you. You're going to go through ups and downs. You're going to have to work hard. But that's what makes this, whatever field you go to, enjoyable. I didn't go into it because of money or necessarily one thing like lifestyle, money. I factored in all those things and really thought about it. And it came down to what made me happy. And at least for me, when somebody is enjoying what they do, you are a better person and you can be a better person to others. and specifically a doctor for other people. You have to find joy and happiness in what you're doing. And I think that's one of the biggest things that was always instilled in me. When I practice emergency medicine, of course, the lifestyle is great. I have no complaints about what emergency medicine physicians get paid now. But at the end of the day, I do love the diversity in the communities that I work in. I love the medicine itself. And, you have to think about that. You're going to be doing this for another 30 years, maybe, until you retire. Right. So
it's great.
So you better love your specialty.
Yeah. It's so cliche, but they have this saying, if you love your work, then you never work a day in your life. And I agree with you. I think that's totally true.
Definitely.
Mirtha, again, thank you so much for being with us. This has been awesome. And I know you're busy and have a baby and you have to get back. But again, we really do appreciate your time.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. Thanks.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea, OMS 3. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do